It was a perfect day. The sun was shining warm and bright on our little suntanned faces. The clouds overhead were the giant puffy ones that I loved. I could lay in the grass for hours and watch as they transformed from a fierce, fire-breathing dragon into a flying unicorn and finally a Volkswagen Beetle before dissolving into nothingness. The clouds would slowly but fluidly cross paths with the sun, providing a moment of shadow. The wind was blowing softly as usual, causing the grass to bend sideways. The potato fields surrounding our property were each a sea of bright green, rustling leaves of a promising spud harvest in the coming fall. The big willow, oak, and maple trees that grew along the creek had been blown into a curved shade from the force of years of windy days. They looked as though they were trying to dip their heads into the water that was rushing past them below. The wind caused the swaying branches to creak and whistle, a quiet melody that was barely audible under the birds warbling. This beautiful day, just like every day during the summer, we were out exploring. Jason, Connie, and I were up for an adventure. Our little brother Jimmy was following close behind, motoring his 4-year-old spindly legs in order to keep up with the older siblings. It was a warm day, so we had as little clothing on as necessary to still be respectable, but our hair was uncombed and unruly. All of us had been kissed by the sun, as Mom called it. I called it a sunburn because my fair skin wouldn't tan. Everyone else was cooked to a nice golden brown. We were all shoeless, not because we didn't have shoes, but we had worn calluses so hard on the bottom of our feet we didn't really need them. And we really didn't want to worry about getting them all soggy and then having to carry them home all muddy and dripping wet. We'd been playing at the giant willow tree that my dad had built a tree house in. It was more like a large platform than a house, but we loved climbing up that makeshift crooked 2x4 steps that Jason had hammered into the trunk of the massive tree. High into the branches, we laid back, chewing on a wheatgrass that we pulled loose from the root to get to the sweet, grassy tasting end. We peeked in on the nest of the magpie babies. They weren't as naked and ugly as before, thank goodness. We put the end of the grass we had chewed on close to their beaks. Immediately, every baby bird opened their bright yellow mouth, gaping open in unison. They stretched their tiny little necks upward, hoping it was a juicy, chewed up and regurgitated worm from their mama. That never got old. After a while, we decided to climb down and throw sticks in the creek that ran along the bank where the great willow tree stood, keeping watch on us. We got bored staying in the same place, though, so we started following the sticks downstream. We headed south along the sandy bank until we came to the bridge that arched over the creek, connecting the ends of the gravel road that went past our house. That bridge had a bunch of secrets, but those stories are for another time. We spent a good hour throwing big old rocks off the bridge, dive-bombing leaves that Jimmy would throw in the flow upstream. We made up a whole war story as to why the enemy leaf must die. Once we tired of the war, we decided to continue south to see if we could find the ultimate treat. We hoped to find the wild asparagus or the rhubarb that grew along the creek bank. We knew that we were not supposed to do it, so we stealthily climbed the fence that stood between the irrigation canal and the long dirt driveway to the Hanson family's house. We trudged through the weeds and grasses that grew more and more dense the further south we went. As luck would have it, the asparagus had passed its season and had turned seedy. However, we found a perfect rhubarb plant. Each of us picked a long, thin stalk off the green and purple grain stem, making sure to break off the great, big green leaves that adorned the top of each one. We gnawed on that not quite ripe rhubarb, and our lips puckered uncontrollably as the sour juices filled our mouths. That's when we heard it. A tiny meow. Shh, said Jason. And again, meow. Immediately, the hunt was on. Quietly, we searched the grasses, following the cries that gradually grew in volume the closer we got. Then jackpot! My stomach did a cartwheel and my skin exploded with goosebumps as we pulled back the grass to reveal a whole litter of feral kittens. They were hunkered close together, eyes wild, hissing and growling at the giddy gaggle of kids staring down at them. There were 4 of them, all black and white tiger-striped. They were just the perfect size, not too old to be a cat and not too young to still need their mama. At least that's what we had determined. Our bright, shiny eyes looked at each other and said all that we needed to confirm that there were exactly enough kitties for each of us to have our own. And immediately we dove for them. The terrified kittens bolted out of reach, but not before Jason grabbed one. The race had begun, zigzagging beneath, between, and anywhere else they could go. The kitties went wild. We chased those cats everywhere. Connie got hers trying to climb a tree. Jason cornered a second catch between a log and an old rusty blue corrugated fence that encompassed our neighbor Cliff's property. Of course, that kitty would go to Jimmy since he was too little to catch his own. That meant I was the last one. I wanted that kitty more than air, and come heck or high water, I was gonna get it. With everybody's help, we corralled the last one. Mine. I inched closer and closer as I lunged for it. It zipped right through my hands between my legs and straight up a phone pole. Luckily, the phone pole butted up against a tall fence post that was attached to a gate. I figured I could climb it and hopefully be able to reach my now named Fluffy kitty. As I got closer and closer to Fluffy, he would climb higher and higher, hanging on for dear life, with his claws dug deep in the smoothly rubbed telephone pole, all the while growling and hissing like crazy. I envisioned all the glorious adventures Fluffy and I would have as I inched ever closer to him. And then I reached my hand up to its fullest extent on my tippy toes, just as Fluffy jumped to the very top of the pole. "No!" everyone yelled at once. Not to be defeated, though, I sucked in a deep breath and wrapped my skinny little arms and legs around the pole and shimmied up the extra 6 inches needed and grabbed that sucker. It took all my strength not to drop Fluffy as I slid down that pole and then gingerly climbed down the gate to finally touch ground. There, I was met by 3 other dirty, sweaty, smiling captors. I was ecstatic and so pumped full of adrenaline I didn't even realize how badly scratched, bloodied, and bitten I was. Fluffy did not want to be caught, and he had made it known as it was evidenced all the way up and down my right arm. I found an old potato sack lying on the ground and wrapped Fluffy in it to keep him from attacking me further. We then proudly marched up the back stairs of the house and into the kitchen to reveal our amazing find to Mom. But for some reason, Mom was not as joyful as her 4 filthy, stinky little kids. She was especially unhappy when Fluffy wriggled free from his potato sack prison and streaked through the kitchen and down the stairs into the basement. In all the ruckus, somehow all of the other kittens escaped, and soon the hunt was on again to find them all. But now they had so many other places to hide. It took most of the afternoon to find all those kitties. 2 were found cowering under my big brother's bed. 1 was backed into the corner of a TV closet, and Fluffy was caught as he hid behind my dresser. Of course, Mom adamantly made us take them outside and charged us to get them back to where we found them. Buzzkill. My dreams for Fluffy and I were very short-lived as I realized that wild kittens would never cuddle me or play dress up. They hate that stuff. But what an adventure we had.